All right, ready to head into the world of Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
You wanted to look behind the curtain of the antebellum South and, well, Margaret Mitchell's novel. It's fiction, but wow, it's full of details that really bring this time period to life.
Yeah, it's true. Gone with the Wind gives us a fascinating way to view this period. I'm really interested to uncover the historical realities that are kind of woven into the story.
I'm all about those fancy parties at Tura and 12 Oaks. Mitchell really paints a picture of plantation life. Those big staircases, lively gatherings, everyone talking about the latest love affair. It's like going back in time. But how accurate is it?
Well, the book definitely shows us the grandeur and spectacle of, the planter class, the details you mentioned, like how important it was to own horses, how casually people gave enslaved people as gifts. It shows us a culture where wealth disparity was huge. Think about Savannah at the time, this busy center of the cotton trade. It drove the South's economy and shaped its social order.
It's interesting how Mitchell contrasts that opulence with characters like Scarlett's dad, Gerald O'Hara. He likes the planter lifestyle, but doesn't quite fit in, does he?
Exactly. Gerald's part of that group in Southern society that was white but not rich, always trying to reach a status that was out of reach. Being Irish made him even more different, and his casual mentions of violence against enslaved people are a scary reminder of how deep racism ran in that world.
That's what makes this deep dive so interesting, right? Finding those uncomfortable truths behind this beloved story. It's like peeling back layers of an onion. We're seeing how Mitchell, maybe without meaning to, romanticized a system built on inequality and oppression.
You got it. Gone with the Wind shows us one viewpoint, the wealthy white Southerner. And while that's important, it's only one part of the story. As we go deeper, we have to remember those we don't hear from in this story, the enslaved people, the poor whites. We have to try and see the South through their eyes. It's a much more complex picture, don't you think?
Totally. Speaking of complex, let's talk about Scarlett and her chasing after Ashley Wilkes. Their whole romance happens with these societal expectations, especially for young women, social standing, family reputation, finding a husband. Scarlett's whole life seems to be about getting Ashley.
It's easy to get lost in the drama, but if you really look, Scarlett's thing for Ashley shows us how few choices and opportunities women had back then. Her beauty, how manipulative she is, always being compared to the, perfect Melanie. It all points to this pressure on women to fit into a specific box.
It's like Mitchell is saying, look, here's this vibrant, passionate woman, but even she's trapped within these rules. And then, of course, there's the threat of war, making everything even more intense.
Right. The coming Civil War is always there in the background, like a shadow over everything. You really see it at the 12 Oaks barbecue, where Scarlett's going to tell Ashley she loves him. You can feel the excitement for the party, but also this growing unease about the tension between the North and the South.
It's amazing how Mitchell captures that tension. You have the lavish barbecue, the dresses, Scarlett's big plan, but you also have talk of secession, debates about states' rights, this undercurrent of fear about what's going to happen.
Exactly. And those whispers about being unhappy, those different views on what the war might mean, they're really important for understanding how complex this time was. Some characters, they like the idea of war, they want to protect their way of life, and then others, they're afraid of the violence, of things changing. It's a small picture of the division within Southern society as a whole.
And then, bam! The war's here, and Scarlett's world is flipped on its head. We see this big change at Tara, going from this symbol of Southern elegance to, shortages, the fear of Yankee soldiers, and these really sad losses.
It's true. It really shows how war doesn't care who you are. It messes up lives everywhere, and Mitchell's really good at weaving Scarlett's personal tragedies, like her first husband and her mother dying, into this larger story of loss and chaos that the Civil War was for the South.
And it's pretty amazing how Scarlett just faces these challenges head on. Her dad's lost in grief, so she takes charge at Tara, she protects her family, and she even figures out how to make money in the middle of Reconstruction. Talk about a survivor.
She's a great example of resilience, of that spirit of starting over that really defined the South after the war. I mean, think about it. The Confederacy is gone, the economy's ruined, and the social order is totally shaken up. But people like Scarlett, with their determination and a little bit of practicality, they find ways to rebuild their lives.
But even as Scarlett's stepping into this new time, her relationships, they show how deeply rooted those old power dynamics still are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like with Rhett Butler, their dynamic is It's explosive right from the start.
Total powder keg, that relationship.
Yeah.
Got Scarlet, the symbol of the New South, going up against Red, a man who, well, he made money from the war and represents a change to the old ways. It's all very symbolic. Their constant fights for control, their different views on what society expects.
It's like their own journeys mirror the South, trying to make peace with its past while facing an uncertain future. And, speaking of complex, let's talk about how race is shown in the book.
Yeah, that's where Gone with the Wind shows its biggest contradictions. While Mitchell lets us see some humanity in the black characters, especially Mammy, she still ends up using harmful stereotypes. That whole loyal, devoted Mammy thing reinforces this idea of black people naturally being subservient to white people, even after they're emancipated.
Yeah, it reminds us that even though slavery is officially over, the fight for real equality is far from done. The book, it barely touches on the Ku Klux Klan, but just them being there is a scary reminder of the very real dangers black people faced back then.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being freed from slavery, finally taking your first steps toward a new life, and then bam, you're up against this terrifying group that wants to keep white supremacy through violence and fear.
The Klan, they represent this awful backlash against Reconstruction, and it's something Mitchell barely mentions. But they remind us that under the surface of this, romanticized South, there's a much darker and more complicated reality.
And it's really important to say that Gone with the Wind gives us one very specific viewpoint on this time. It mostly ignores what black people experienced and the systemic injustices they faced. To really understand Reconstruction, we got to look beyond what Mitchell wrote and find those missing voices, those untold stories of resilience and resistance.
Yeah, it makes you realize that Scarlett's world, with all its drama and turmoil, is just a small part of a much bigger story. She's going through her own stuff, but it's all happening while society is dealing with these huge changes.
Exactly. Her story is part of this bigger story of the South, trying to figure out its identity in a world without slavery. As we get deeper into Scarlett's love life, it's so important to keep that bigger picture in mind.
Speaking of love life, let's talk about Frank Kennedy. Scarlett marries him for stability, but their relationship always felt, kind of empty. Was it just me, or?
Not at all. It shows perfectly how Scarlett's holding on to a time that's gone. She throws those fancy parties, trying to bring back the magic of her life before the war. But those parties, they feel hollow. They're full of, newly rich Yankees and opportunistic carpetbaggers, showing how uncomfortably the South is changing.
So even as Scarlett's trying to rebuild her life, there's this feeling of, missing a past she can't get back. It's like she's running from how the war changed everything, but it's always there, right under the surface.
And her marriage to Frank, it really shows that inner struggle. He's stable, kind, all those things a traditional Southern gentleman should be, but he doesn't have that passion, that spark that really gets to Scarlett.
She's still hung up on Ashley, isn't she?
Yeah.
It's like she can't let go of this perfect version of love, even though a good guy like Frank is right there.
That's what makes Scarlett so interesting, don't you think? She's driven by this need to chase something she can't have, whether it's Ashley's love or some romanticized idea of the Old South. It makes you wonder, is she going to make the same mistakes again and again? Or will she finally learn from them?
But before we get into that, there's one relationship I have to talk about. Rhett and his daughter, Bonnie Blue. He absolutely adores her, and it shows this whole other side of him.
It's fascinating, right? This tough, cynical guy just melts when he's with Bonnie. He spoils her, dotes on her, and for a second you see a soft side of him that's totally different from how he is with Scarlett.
Which makes it even more heartbreaking when tragedy strikes. Bonnie's death just devastates Red, and it feels like a turning point, especially for him and Scarlett.
Absolutely. Bonnie dying shatters the little peace they had. Rhett's heartbroken, totally crushed. And Scarlett, I think for the first time, really has to face what her own actions have caused. How she chased a love that maybe was never really there.
It's like, with Bonnie gone, that wall Scarlett built around herself, it crumbles. She finally sees the real Rhett, a man who's hurting because she's always wanted someone else.
That's the sad truth about them, isn't it? Rhett spends years trying to make Scarlett love him, but she's too busy going after Ashley. He gives her his heart, and she just uses his feelings to get what she wants.
And then he says that line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." That's it, right? The end.
It's over. Those 4 words, they're like the sound of a heartbreaking Rhett's leaving, and it's this huge moment for Scarlett. She has to look at what she's done, the chances she missed, the love she threw away.
But even though she's lost so much, Mitchell gives us that little bit of hope, Tomorrow's another day. That's so Scarlet, isn't it? No matter how badly she messes up, she's going to get back up and keep going.
Yeah, that last line, it's hopeful, but also kind of vague. I mean, it shows how strong Scarlet is, how she refuses to be defeated. It makes you think she still believes she can be happy, that she can start over. But then again, you wonder, will she fall into the same traps? Will she keep chasing dreams that can't come true? Will she ever, really learn?
That's the big question. Will Scarlet go after Rhett, try to get him back? Or will she finally leave the past behind and find a future on her own terms?
And that's what makes Mitchell's ending so good. It doesn't give us easy answers. We're left wondering, unsure about what's going to happen to Scarlet. It makes us think about how complicated she is and what choices she'll make next.
So after this deep dive into Gone with the Wind, what do we know about the antebellum South? What about its legacy, the things that still affect us? It's a made-up story, but it makes us think about some big stuff.
I agree. Mitchell's version of this time period, yeah, it's romanticized and it's flawed, but it's a place to start understanding Southern culture, how slavery still affects us, and how hard it is to rebuild after a terrible war.
We saw how the novel deals with race, gender, class. It's about letting go of the past, even when it hurts. It's a story full of characters with flaws, big romances, huge historical events, and Mitchell's words just pull you in.
It reminds us that history isn't just dates and battles. It's about real people, what they loved, what they lost. Gone with the Wind gives us a peek into that world. It asks us to look deeper, past the surface, to see the many sides of the American South.
Wow, this deep dive has been something else. Romance, tragedy, history lessons. I hope you've enjoyed going through the world of Gone with the Wind with me.
And don't forget, this isn't the end. Find other viewpoints on this time in American history. Learn about the people Mitchell's story leaves out, the enslaved, the poor whites, those who are freed and trying to find their place in Reconstruction. There's always something new to find, something new to learn. So keep asking questions, keep searching, and keep digging deeper into the past.
Thanks for coming with us on this amazing deep dive.